Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku a Hero Beyond the Shadows? Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku had an oddly calm summer and was now preparing for his second year at UA. As he entered the campus, he took a deep breath of fresh air and hurried to his new class, Class 2A. Upon entering, he saw familiar faces among his old classmates. Some, like Ochako and Kaken, he had seen a bit over the summer, but others had changed since last year. Denki had his hair styled in a man bun, Jiro's hair was a bit longer, Ida sported a new pair of glasses, and Mineta had grown a good 5 inches, now standing at 3 feet 11.5 inches. As class began, Izuku felt happy to see everyone. He quickly took a seat and awaited their new teacher. Midway through class, the loudspeaker crackled to life, calling for him to report to Principal Nizu's office immediately. Confused, he got up and walked there. Upon entering, he saw Mirio, All Might, Nizu, and Aizawa. A sudden sinking feeling settled in his stomach, as if something was about to go wrong. "Take a seat, young Midoriya," Aizawa instructed. After sitting down, All Might began to speak. "After deliberation and a strong argument from Aizawa here, we have decided that Mirio should inherit One for All." Izuku remained silent as the weight of the news sank in, his emotions shifting from confusion to anger. Aizawa noticed his reaction and asked if he was okay. Izuku's frustration boiled over. He had risked his physical health, endured countless injuries, and now he was being asked to give up everything he had worked for. All Might gave him a small nod, and in a fit of anger, Izuku ripped out a piece of his hair and handed it to him. He expressed his feelings bluntly and stormed out of UA, leaving behind his backpack. He texted Ochako to take his bag, feeling as if he had been expelled from the place he had dreamed of being. As he walked home, he turned off his phone and absorbed his surroundings, realizing this was the end of his dream before it had truly begun. The feeling of despair settled in as he reached his apartment, sneaking into his room and laying down, accepting that he could no longer be a hero. 2 days later, after lying in bed for what felt like an eternity, Izuku received a text. He had received plenty of messages checking on him, but this one was different. Kirishima had added him to a group chat with Momo, Ida, Ochako, Kaminari, and Tsuyu. The message suggested they train together at a nearby gym. Shocked, Izuku felt a flicker of hope. Even though he was no longer a UA student, his friends still wanted to train with him. He quickly responded, agreeing to meet after school. Excited, he jumped out of bed and got dressed, eager to train again. He had let the idea that he had lost his quirk make him doubt his ability to continue training. Once UA hours were over, he headed to the gym. When he arrived, the place was mostly empty, save for one woman striking a punching bag with fierce determination and a bored worker staring into space. He put on a pair of headphones and began to hit a bag, gradually increasing his speed. Despite losing his quirk, he still retained the muscle mass he had built, meaning he was still strong. After 30 minutes, his friends arrived, and they all began to train using his old regimen. Meanwhile, Hibana took a break from her workout, sitting on a bench and sipping water. She noticed a group of teens training, particularly the green-haired one who caught her attention. He was running on the treadmill, outpacing his friends, except for one who had engines for legs. Impressed, she continued to watch as he moved on to bench pressing, easily lifting 68 kilograms as a warm-up. By the end of his session, he had maxed out at 136 kilograms. She was amazed at how someone so small could lift nearly 3 times his weight. As the group began to pack up, Hibana checked her phone and realized they had been there for about an hour. She approached the green-haired boy and tapped him on the shoulder. She introduced herself as Yumiko, a member of the Tokyo Police Department's Special Assault Team, and expressed her admiration for his strength. She suggested he consider becoming an officer when he was of age, offering to guide him through the process. She also mentioned that the police department could help him with college expenses. The boy listened intently, and after she asked for his phone, she added herself as a contact, encouraging him to reach out if he had any questions. He nodded and hurried off to catch up with his friends, while she packed her things and left the gym. 2 hours later, Izuku lay on his bed, contemplating whether to contact Yumiko. After a long shower, he fell back onto his bed, feeling conflicted. Just then, he heard the door open. His mother called out to him, freshly home from work. She asked how his day had been, and he shrugged, mentioning the conversation he had with the officer who saw potential in him. His mother smiled brightly, encouraging him to consider the idea of still being a hero in some capacity. While only she and the teachers knew the truth about why he left UA, everyone else believed he had lost his quirk. The thought of still being a hero filled him with renewed hope. I need to contact her now. Quickly, I pulled out my phone and messaged Yumiko, expressing my desire to join the police force. Almost immediately, she replied, instructing me to meet her at the local police office in Tokyo to discuss it further. 2 weeks later, after completing physical exams, obtaining parental permission, and sorting out schooling, it was decided that I would stay with Masaru, one of Yumiko's coworkers and close friends. We hit it off. I found his drone and various gadgets fascinating, while he appreciated my quick learning ability. He began teaching me basic engineering concepts. I breezed through the physical exams, but the knowledge test loomed ahead. As I reviewed the questions, I realized they were quite challenging, ranging from complex math problems to strategies for subduing someone with a powerful quirk. After 3 hours of second-guessing myself and meticulously checking each answer, I submitted my test to the chief. He reviewed it, his eyes widening in surprise as he confirmed that all my answers were correct. His astonishment was understandable, given my age, but he seemed pleased. Next came the weapons aim test, where I would need to demonstrate my proficiency with various firearms: a handgun, submachine gun, assault rifle, and shotgun. The targets were set at varying distances, with the handgun at 35 yards, the submachine gun at 50 yards, the assault rifle at 250 yards, and the shotgun at 95 yards. I noticed 10 other recruits present, and I had chosen to complete all my tests in one day, while they had opted to spread theirs over multiple days. Before the test began, Yumiko addressed the recruits. She informed us that this was our final test, and after it, we would learn if we had made it through. We had started with 100 recruits, and now only 11 remained. The others were in more basic training. Yumiko emphasized that we were on the verge of joining the Special Assault Team of Japan, urging us to perform well. As the recruits took their turns, I was the last to go. I sighed as Yumiko recited the rules for the 11th time. She explained that we would start with the FN572 Malawian Quachas handgun, then switch to the MP5, followed by the Type 89 or G36, and finally finish with the Mossberg 590A1 or SPAS 12, depending on our choice. The test would be based on speed and accuracy, which she would monitor on her tablet. We were required to use the entire magazine or all shells. With a countdown of 3, 2, 1, she shouted, "Go!" I quickly began firing the 5.7, hitting the trigger rapidly as I watched dust fly off the target. With my earmuffs on, I heard the gun click, realizing the slide was back. I swiftly dropped it and picked up the MP5. This weapon required managing recoil, and while I struggled initially, I quickly regained my composure. Once the MP5 was empty, I moved on to the Type 89, which was easier to handle, and I saw dust erupt from the target once more. Finally, I grabbed the Mossberg 590A1. I took my first shot, watching as the wood target splintered, then pumped it again, repeating until the 8-shell tube was empty. After removing my earmuffs and goggles, I looked at Yumiko, who simply nodded in acknowledgement. I had been given a chance to do something significant, and I was determined to ensure that no one could take that opportunity away from me. Name: Izuku Midoriya. Height: 1.7 meters, 5 feet 7 inches feet. Weight: 68 kilograms, 150 pounds. To be: July 15th. Age: 21. Appearance: combat. Primary weapon: Colt M4. Secondary weapon: SIG P226. Gadget: multi-purpose carrying drone, tri-carry. Biography: born into a low-middle-class family, his mother worked as a nurse while his father was largely absent from his life. After gaining admission to the prestigious UA, he experienced significant challenges. Following these events, he was discovered by Yumiko Hibana Imagawa at a gym. This encounter propelled him to become a S.A.T soldier at just 18, shortly after graduating high school. By the age of 20, he earned the title of Rainbow's youngest operator, surpassing others by 5 years. Fluent in both English and Japanese, he has established himself as a formidable soldier with 10 confirmed kills and 28 unconfirmed. Psychological report. Private Izuku is a unique case. He is extremely timid and polite, yet also stoic. From the stories shared about him, this does not come as a surprise. He possesses remarkable intelligence and learns quickly. The conversation with him provided a refreshing change from the chaotic life of Rainbow. Izuku keeps a notebook filled with detailed observations about his comrades, which he uses to help them improve, though this approach does not always sit well with others. Nevertheless, his notes are impressively detailed, showcasing his intelligence. He even provided a copy to me within a day, which I found to be incredibly insightful. He is open about his past, except for his time at UA, which he left under unfortunate circumstances. The stories surrounding his departure are disheartening, particularly regarding how he was treated. He often speaks of friends who are now pro-heroes or well-known sidekicks. Notable mentions include Aki Todoroki, a close friend from his second high school, Tsuyu Azui, pro-hero Frappi, Ochako Uraraka, a popular sidekick of pro-hero Mirko, Shoto Todoroki, the number 2 hero, and Katsuki Bakugo, the number 3 hero. Izuku has formed strong bonds with Yumiko and Miresu, Echo, Inetsu. He has also grown close to Grace, Dakibi, Nam, sharing a mutual love for video games and anime, Timur, Glazkov, with whom he shares an appreciation for the arts, Ella Bozak, who shares his taste in music, and Max, Matsi, Goose, who makes him feel relaxed and at ease. Beyond these connections, he tends to keep to himself. He has experienced 2 brief romantic relationships, one with Megan Valkyrie Castellano, which ended due to their age difference, and another with Julian Rook, Nizon, which concluded after an incident during a mission. He has expressed admiration for Taina Caviera Pereira, with whom he has sparred multiple times. Caviera has spoken highly of him, which is noteworthy, as she rarely praises anyone. When first encountering Izuku, he appeared quiet and timid, but he quickly adapted and began to work well with others. His ability to learn and adapt is impressive, and he tends to keep a close circle of friends, most of whom share his reserved nature, with the exception of Grace, Dakibi, Nam and Matsi. This shared demeanor has fostered quick friendships among them. Gadget Assessment, Tri-Carry. Assessment by Miresu, Echo, Inatsu, Elena, Mira, Maria Alvarez, Grace, Dakibi, Nam, Max, Matsi, Goose, Izuku, Deku Midoriya. I managed to persuade Mr. Midoriya to allow me to examine his drone. The arrangement required Miresu, Max, and Grace to join me for the testing. Echo provided a quick overview of its functionality, as he is its creator. I appreciated Izuku's willingness to let me test it alongside Miresu, who promptly disassembled it to reveal its inner workings. I discovered that Max's gadget was unable to hack it, which visibly frustrated Grace, while Izuku found humor in the situation. However, Mute, Chandler's gadget could indeed disable it. Overall, after thorough testing, I can confidently say that this drone is well constructed and will be valuable in the field. Dr. Elena Maria Alvarez. As Izuku slowly woke up, he accidentally bumped his head against something hard. He exclaimed in frustration as his vision cleared, revealing a 30-pound dumbbell hanging from a rope, accompanied by a note attached to it. With irritation bubbling inside him, he ripped the note off and read, "Enjoy the present, Grace." He jumped out of bed, quickly putting on a t-shirt, shorts, and an old pair of Nike Air Forces. After checking his drawer, he grabbed an old taser from his police days. Throwing open his door, he found Mike Thatcher Baker standing there, surprised by his demeanor. Izuku simply muttered one word, "Grace." Mike nodded knowingly as Izuku began his pursuit. With the taser flicked on, he called out, "Oh, Grace. Where are you?" Upon entering the cafeteria, he spotted her. The moment their eyes met, she glanced at the sparking taser in his hand, and the other students stared, sensing the impending chaos. As he stepped closer, he noticed her eyes widen, and a warm breath brushed against his neck, causing him to drop the taser before she could say anything. It was Kaviria. Izuku walked over to the kitchen area and ordered from the cook, asking for some cinnamon toast crunch before taking a seat next to Grace. She smiled and asked if he liked his gift. He sighed in response, focusing on his food as the others chatted around them. Timur then asked if he was ready for training that day. Izuku simply replied, "Nope," before returning to his meal. Once everyone finished, they dispersed to train in various areas. Training day occurred once a week, allowing everyone to choose their activities, with the only requirement being to train from 8 to he approached his locker, using his thumbprint to access it. He retrieved his M4 and some rounds before heading to the gun range, setting his target at the farthest distance. The record for accuracy belonged to Timur, followed by Callie, and then himself. After putting on goggles and earmuffs, he loaded his gun and prepared to shoot. Taking a deep breath, he aimed and pulled the trigger, feeling the flash as he hit his target with ease. When the gun clicked empty, he retrieved the target, pleased with his performance, and disposed of it before returning to the lockers to put away his weapon. Changing into a black tank top, he entered a large gym filled with people engaged in various activities lifting weights, sparring, chatting, and running laps. He approached a bench and waved over a young recruit, asking him to spot him. The recruit, looking timid yet eager, nodded in agreement. Izuku started with a warm-up of 200 pounds, completing 10 reps quickly. He then requested 2 35-pound plates, which the recruit hurriedly added to the bar. After another 10 reps with the extra weight, Izuku pushed himself further, completing 6 more reps before conceding and letting the recruit help him reset the bar. Next, he moved to the treadmill, inserting earbuds and selecting a workout playlist. The first song played was "Like Me" by Knot, energizing him as he gradually increased the speed. He focused on maintaining his pace while onlookers began to gather, intrigued by his determination. As he reached a speed of 10, he smiled slightly, glancing back at the group of operators watching him. Feeling bold, he attempted to run backward, but it backfired, sending him tumbling to the ground. Laughter erupted around him, but he remained too focused to care. After a moment, someone helped him up. It was Matsi, who commented on his fall with a chuckle. Izuku sighed, acknowledging the truth in his friend's words. Just then, Eliza Ash Cohen's voice came over the speaker, summoning them to the training grounds. He sighed again, knowing there would be no rest with her around. He and Matsi headed to the locker rooms to gear up before making their way to the training ground, where they found 7 other operators: Ella, Grace, Kaviria, Julian, Mike, James, Smoke, Porter, and Jack, Pulse, Estrada. Eliza addressed the group, stating that they would engage in combat training to ensure everyone was at their best. She assigned teams, with Izuku, Grace, Mike, Julian, and James on the attack while the others took up defensive positions in a house with destructible walls. Izuku decided to team up with Ella, who was armed with her FO-12 shotgun. He shared his strategy, suggesting they hide in a room that would give them an advantage if the attackers chose to enter. Ella agreed, quickly setting up a Grismot mine at the door to incapacitate anyone who might survive their initial onslaught. As the loudspeaker announced the start of the final round, they prepared for the incoming attack, ready to defend their position. I checked my drone and saw that Julian and Mike had breached the area. It was time to act. As I spoke, the shotgun fired, quickly breaking down the wall. The loudspeaker announced the elimination of operators Rook and Thatcher. I began to move cautiously through the building, the silence interrupted by 2 shots. The announcement followed: Operator Ella eliminated. Then came 4 shots and the sounds of an angry Brazilian woman. Operator Kaviria was eliminated. With only Matsi and me left, I peeked around a corner and spotted Grace, who was about to deploy her logic bomb. I drew my sidearm and fired, hitting her squarely in the forehead. Operator Dakibi was eliminated. As I continued to roam, a loud boom echoed, followed by the announcement of Matsi and Smoke's elimination. Now it was just Eliza and me. I dashed through the house, hoping to find her. In my haste, I collided with her, causing both of us to lose our weapons. I recovered first and kicked her gun away as she sprang up. We exchanged punches, her strikes more precise as she landed blow after blow. I swung wildly, trying to connect, and finally managed to knock her back. Reaching for my sidearm, I realized it was missing. I looked up to see Eliza holding it. With a smirk, she remarked on my missing weapon before firing it. The loudspeaker announced my elimination. Operator Deku eliminated. Attackers win. An hour later, with ice resting on my forehead, I was in Ella's dorm alongside Ella, Grace, and Timur, watching Yuzuki-chan Wants to Hang Out, and engaging in various activities. I lounged on the couch while Timur cleaned his ppm, Ella painted, and Grace lay on the other side of the couch, sharing my discomfort. Suddenly, an announcement echoed through the room. "Can Izuku come to my office?" I sighed and got up, walking to the office where Harry awaited. Harry asked if I had attended UA, and I nodded, curious about where this was heading. He explained that he had 2 tasks for me. First, I was to select a group of 10 operators, one of whom would serve as second-in-command to protect UA from a group known as the Quirkless Union for Freedom. Second, I, along with Masaru, Yumiko, and 2 operators of my choice, would approach the Japanese government to secure permission to recruit 5 heroes. I nodded and inquired about the operation's name. "Operation Heroes Light," he replied. At dinner, I reviewed the operation documents. The idea of recruiting heroes for Rainbow seemed foolish to me. I had my earbuds in, listening to the sleep-deprived podcast, which was humorous and had a touch of dark comedy. I also examined the UA documents, noting that Mirko had become a teacher, along with American Hero Stars and Stripes and Clairvoyance. As I read further, I discovered that Midnight was married and P. Arginenti. I felt a longing to return to UA just to reconnect with my old teachers. My thoughts were interrupted by Alexander Tachenka Senevive. He greeted me and asked what I was doing. Our conversations were rare, not due to dislike but because we had different social circles, except for Timur. I mentioned I was involved in an operation and asked if he had any diplomatic skills. He chuckled, admitting that combat was his forte. I noted this and wrote down his name for my group. He smiled and nodded, accepting his place in the operation. After dinner, I returned to my room and sat at my desk, struggling to decide who to bring along. I headed to the roof, lit a cigarette, and gazed over the treetops. Our base was nestled in the British forest, and I considered visiting London, just an hour away. My thoughts were interrupted when Sam Zero Fisher appeared. He commented on not knowing others came up there and took a seat beside me. I sighed and chuckled, sharing that I was leading my first operation to the high school that had dashed my dreams of becoming a pro hero in Japan. He acknowledged that it sounded tough and asked who I had on my team. I shrugged, mentioning Tachanka and that I needed 9 more. He offered his assistance, and I smiled in gratitude. After some time in silence, I texted Harry to inform him I was heading to his office. Upon entering, he greeted me with a smile. I explained my uncertainty about who to bring for the operation, mentioning Tachanka and Zero. Harry suggested Pulse, Buck, and Ella, emphasizing the importance of comfort in my choices. I noted these names down and thanked him before leaving his office. With 6 operators secured, I contemplated the final 4. While I could bring Yumiko, she and Masaru would be focused on our meeting with the Prime Minister. I considered who would be most useful for a defensive operation, realizing that surveillance would be crucial. I decided I needed a medic, leading me to my first choice, my ex-girlfriend, Megan Valkyrie J. Castellano. We were on good terms, but the situation was still awkward due to lingering feelings. Next, I thought of Emmanuel Twitch Pichon, whose drone capabilities would be beneficial for surveillance. The decision to bring Mina Thunderbird Sky felt right. This would be one of her first major operations, but her skills as a medic were exceptional. With a sigh, the operator reviewed the files, scanning through each one until the last caught their attention. The operator knew neither her real name nor her face, and neither did anyone else. Yet, there was a deep-seated trust in her abilities to assist with this mission. Next, the operator needed to select 2 more individuals for the diplomatic aspect of the operation. Colin Warden McKinley was the first choice. His close ties to the U.S. president suggested he could be a valuable asset. The final selection was Sophia Bozak. Although her involvement might stir tensions between the sisters, as the operator had often intervened in their disputes, it was necessary to split them for this mission. Sophia would handle diplomacy while Ella would focus on combat. With the team nearly assembled, the operator prepared to send the documents to 6. Standing up from the desk, they stretched and glanced at the clock, realizing it was getting late. After changing into something more comfortable, they quickly succumbed to sleep, ready to face the challenges ahead. As everyone boarded the private plane in the early morning, around 2:36 a.m., I received a quick briefing from my second-in-command, Alexander. The voice on the call informed us that we would be landing at an American military base just 10 minutes from Tokyo. From there, we would be transported to UA, where temporary shelter had been arranged. The upcoming festival was in a week, and there were concerns about a potential attack from the quirkless Union of Freedom. Our mission was to ensure that the attack did not occur, and if it did, to repel it and neutralize as many threats as possible. The call ended and Alexander turned to me. "I guess you'll handle all the talking?" he remarked. I nodded while checking my pockets for my cigarettes. Finding them, I took one out, placed it between my lips, and lit it, inhaling the smoke deeply. "That isn't very healthy, comrade," Alexander commented, his tone disapproving. I shrugged in response. "I've convinced myself that I could die at any moment, so I might as well enjoy what I have," I replied, taking another drag from the cigarette. I glanced at my phone and noted it was 2:40 a.m., meaning my mom was likely awake in Japan. I sent her a quick text saying, "I love you," and she responded almost immediately. After putting out my cigarette, I noticed Alexander had fallen asleep. Knowing it would be a long trip, I joined him in rest, aware that in 12 hours, we would land at the American military base. 12 hours later, I felt a sudden jolt as the plane landed, waking everyone else. Once the plane came to a stop, we disembarked with our gear. An American general greeted us. "Welcome. I'm General Garvey. You must be Mr. Midoriya," he said, extending his hand. I shook it and asked if they would be involved in the operation. The general smiled and confirmed that they would have Air Force support monitoring the situation and providing warnings about any attacks, along with 140 soldiers on standby, led by Staff Sergeant Wilkins. I nodded, understanding the urgency to reach UA and prepare for our mission. "Well, we should get going," the general said as 3 trucks pulled up. We all climbed into separate vehicles. I gazed out the window, watching as we left the base and entered Tokyo. The city was vibrant, filled with flashing lights and people engaged in various activities, from chatting to eating to engrossed in their phones. I even spotted a man playing bagpipes, which made me chuckle. After about 30 minutes, we arrived in my hometown of Mistsafsu, where UA was located. It took another 10 minutes to reach the impressive campus. I could see that my companions were in awe of its size, but for me, it brought back memories of the darkest time in my life. I hadn't spoken to my friends here since. I was 17 5 years ago. I had cut off all contact with UA. Then one name crossed my mind, Eri. As we began to exit the truck, I climbed into the bed to hand out equipment to my team, while Alexander did the same for his group. A sigh escaped me. Even after all these years, I never wanted to return, yet here I was. Upon entering the building, we were greeted by Principal Nizu. "Hello everyone. I am Principal Nizu of UA. We are the top hero school in the country and the world, offering top-tier support classes as well as regular education." I looked at him, remembering how he had played a role in my departure from the school. He either didn't recognize me or chose to ignore me as he continued his tour. Eventually, we arrived at our barracks, which were quite nice, featuring a TV and a table like a more affordable version of the dorms I had once known. I quickly set up my belongings and caught up with Nizu before he left. "Nizu, we need to talk," I called out. He turned and acknowledged me. "Yes, Izuku, what is it you need?" So, he did remember who I was. "Classes are still not in session since it's lunchtime, right?" I asked. He nodded, surprised that I remembered. "Yes, you are correct. I assume you want to see your old teachers in Eri?" I nodded in agreement, and he led me into the school. Upon reaching his office, he announced over the loudspeaker, "Eraserhead Midnight, present mic, and young Eri, please come to my office. He then gestured for me to hide in a cabinet. I chuckled and complied, leaving the door slightly ajar to watch. After about 10 minutes, they all entered at once. What is it, Nizu? Aizawa asked. He looked much the same, though his hair was slightly longer. Midnight had a noticeable baby bump and appeared much happier, while present Mike looked unchanged. And Eri, she was now 12, taller, with shorter hair and a more developed horn. Nizu smiled and said, I have a surprise for you all. You can come out now. As I stepped out of the cabinet, their eyes widened and Eri's filled with tears. Problem, child? Aizawa said, recognizing me. Yes, sir, I replied. Suddenly, I felt something rush into me, wrapping its arms around my waist. It was Eri, the little girl I had helped save. I embraced her, feeling her tears soak into my shoulder. You look so much older, Midnight remarked, astonished. Present Mike was momentarily speechless. Where did you go after everything? My old teacher inquired. After everything happened, I graduated, joined the police, and made my way into the S.A.T. From there, I rose through the ranks and ended up in a large organization dedicated to combating terrorism. Aizawa nodded, acknowledging my journey. After everything, you still became a hero in your own way, Midnight said. We continued to talk for another hour before I decided it was time to return to the barracks. Upon arrival, everyone was engaged in a card game and enjoying each other's company. The group spent the remainder of the day in a state of relaxation, anticipating the events of the following day. The protagonist understood that they would need to visit everyone again, but first, there was an important meeting with the Prime Minister to discuss the heroes they needed to recruit. As Izuku adjusted his suit in the armored limo, he felt a wave of nervousness wash over him. He reached for his cigarettes when a hand touched his shoulder. It was Yumiko. She noticed his anxiety and asked if he was nervous. He nodded, feeling the heat of the moment intensify as they approached their destination. Despite the simplicity of the meeting, it felt monumental. Yumiko reassured him that everything would be fine, mentioning that Masaru was just as much of a nervous wreck. This made Izuku chuckle. She was right. He expressed his desire to get the meeting over with, revealing that he would soon have to face heroes he had gone to school with. The thought of their reactions upon learning he was alive and back in Japan weighed heavily on him, especially since his mother was still unaware. Yumiko acknowledged the difficulty of the situation but encouraged him to focus on the future, suggesting he take a 2-week vacation to reconnect with old friends after the operation. Izuku nodded, knowing that was a plan he would consider. Lost in thought, he felt the car come to a stop outside the Prime Minister's office. Exiting the vehicle, he approached the entrance, where 2 security guards stood. He quickly flashed his police badge and ID, while the others presented their identification as well. They were greeted by a secretary who informed the Prime Minister of their arrival. After a brief wait, she nodded, signaling that they could proceed. They entered an elevator, which took them to the designated floor. Stepping out, they found themselves in a room with an older gentleman seated at a desk, a cup of tea beside him and various pictures adorning the walls. He greeted Izuku with a smile, identifying him as Mr. Midoriya. Izuku introduced himself, and the man, Mr. Yamamoto, inquired about the purpose of their visit. Izuku explained that they aim to recruit heroes to combat terrorist groups globally, emphasizing Japan's wealth of heroes and the potential for increased negotiating power with other nations. Mr. Yamamoto raised concerns about why only Japanese heroes were being considered, expressing his reluctance to lose some of his best heroes, which could pose additional threats to Japan. Izuku took a deep breath and elaborated on the plan, assuring him that the heroes would remain under Japan's control and could return if needed. This seemed to ease Yamamoto's worries, prompting him to ask how many heroes they intended to recruit. Izuku smiled, sensing they had made progress. He requested 5 heroes, but Yamamoto reacted defensively, arguing that it was too many and could jeopardize Japan's safety. Just then, Yumiko intervened, pointing out that Japan had plenty of heroes and that the situation had been stable since Lemillion had dealt with a significant threat. Masaru added that they could take on one of Japan's more troublesome heroes, suggesting a win-win situation. Yamamoto considered their proposal and agreed to provide 6 heroes, including Katsuki Bakugo, who was currently facing media scrutiny due to a past incident. Izuku felt a mix of tension and determination. This would be a challenge, but he was ready. He quickly listed his preferred heroes: Pro Hero Froppy, Pro Hero Todoroki, Pro Hero Mirko, Pro Hero Uravity, and Pro Hero Red Riot. Yamamoto informed them that he could not control whether the heroes accepted the offer, but he appreciated their help in alleviating some media pressure. After concluding the meeting, they left and drove back to UA. The ride was mostly quiet, with Izuku and Yumiko sharing a few words. Upon arriving at UA, Izuku hurried to change into something more casual before heading out to speak with the heroes. Just as he was about to leave, he was approached by Emma, who greeted him in a friendly manner. Surprised by her attention, he admitted that he was overwhelmed with work. She offered her assistance, a blush creeping onto her cheeks, leaving Izuku momentarily taken aback. Not to sound rude, but how? Emma grabbed his hand and led him behind the barracks. She handed him a brownie, insisting it would help. Confused but accepting, he took the treat, grateful for the gesture. After finishing the brownie, he brushed off the crumbs and got into a car to meet Tsu, the first person he needed to convince. As the driver took him there, he began to feel calmer yet increasingly tired. What was in that brownie? His thoughts were interrupted as they arrived at Tsu's apartment building. He entered and quickly found her door, knocking softly and trying to conceal his voice. He asked if anyone was home, deepening his voice. A response came from behind the door, and soon it opened to reveal Tsuyu. She seemed surprised, not recognizing him at first. He inquired if Tsuyu Azui was present, to which she confirmed her identity. Once inside, he dropped the act, complimenting her apartment. It was then that realization dawned on her. She stammered his name, surprised to see him. He reassured her that he hadn't disappeared. He had just stopped hanging around you. She hugged him tightly, tears of relief soaking into his shoulder as she expressed her fears of his absence. It struck him how much his departure had affected those he considered friends. As fatigue washed over him, he confessed to Tsuyu that he wasn't feeling well, slipping into a deep sleep. In another part of Japan, someone was eagerly anticipating Izuku's return. They missed him dearly and were excited to show him how much they had changed. Before heading out, they consumed a small vial that transformed their appearance into that of an ordinary civilian, blending into the bustling streets of Tokyo. When Izuku finally opened his eyes, the light was blinding. He groaned, feeling disoriented as he took in his surroundings. Tsuyu was sitting nearby, reading and sipping tea. She smiled at him, acknowledging his awakening. He nodded, realizing that whatever Emma had given him must have been altered in some way. Tsuyu asked him where he had been, and he shrugged, sensing her confusion. She requested the whole story, and he began recounting his experiences since leaving UA. After being expelled due to his quirk being stolen, he had taken some time away from school. Encouraged by his friends, he started going to the gym, where he was offered training as an officer. He excelled in the tests and secured a spot in the special assault team. Along the way, he made a new friend named Aki and eventually got involved with a group called Rainbow, which was why he had returned. Tsuyu listened intently, her expression skeptical as she processed his words. He assured her that if she declined his offer to join Rainbow, there would be no hard feelings. She had many questions, wondering about the legality of his hero work and the nature of the group he was involved with. He explained that Rainbow was legal and operated under the United Nations, allowing Japan to have a say in its activities. He admitted that his primary reason for returning was to recruit her and complete a mission. When she asked who else would be involved, he listed several familiar names, including Bakugo, Mirko, Todoroki, Kirishima, and Ochako. After a moment of contemplation, Tsuyu agreed to join on the condition that he wouldn't disappear again. He smiled, promising that he wouldn't go AWOL again, as it would be too dangerous. As she began to pack, a sense of unease settled in his stomach, as if something was about to go wrong. He texted the driver to prepare for their departure, requesting that he also bring his Colt M4. Tsuyu returned with her belongings, and while they waited, he initiated a conversation about their classmates. Tsuyu explained that most of them were still heroes, but 4 of their classmates had mysteriously disappeared the previous year, coinciding with the emergence of a group called the League of Red Mask. Izuku's interest peaked at the mention of the new threat, and he inquired about who had gone missing. Tsuyu listed their names, her voice wavering slightly when she mentioned Tokoyami, leaving Izuku curious about the underlying emotions tied to that name. By then, a text appeared on my phone from Ella, instructing me to be ready. Tsu acknowledged the message as we exited the apartment, and I noticed a different vehicle waiting for us, 2 Humvees. I climbed into the front seat of one, while Tsu settled in the back to talk with Ella. Ella handed me my gun, explaining that there was a concern about a vigilante who wasn't fond of false heroes or police. I nodded in understanding as she also passed me my vest, which I appreciated. Tsu asked Ella how she was doing, to which Ella shrugged and replied that she wasn't keen on dealing with a vigilante, but life had its own flow. Suddenly, the familiar sound of a gunshot rang out, striking the side of the Humvee. I yelled for everyone to get out and prepare for combat, hopping out of the vehicle and noticing the frightened civilians around us. I instructed Ella to evacuate the civilians before returning to assist us. Another shot hit the sidewalk nearby, prompting me to return fire while searching for Tsuyu, who was stuck behind another car. I called out to Tsuyu, urging her to run over while I provided cover fire so we could devise a plan. She nodded and made her way over just as another shot cracked through the air. I heard a police officer shout in pain, having been caught in the crossfire. The situation was escalating quickly. I sighed, realizing we needed to get the officer to safety. However, before I could finish my thought, another shot rang out, and the officer fell silent. Peeking over the edge, I heard Tsu yell my name, urging me to be careful as another shot missed me. I counted silently, waiting for the right moment to act. The shooter was not using an automatic weapon. I instructed Tsu to look for any glimmers that might reveal the snipers. Position. She nodded and reported seeing a glare from a building across from us. I quickly radioed Ella, asking her to flank the building and distract the shooter while Tsu and I moved in. As we waited, the sniper fired again. I caught a glimpse of green hair and the flash of an Evo Scorpion. I signaled to Tsu, and she launched me up to the roof with her tongue. I spotted the shooter and fired, but my shots missed as they rolled away. They then brandished a knife and charged at me silently. I tried to dodge, but they kicked my gun from my hand. I pulled out my knife, ready for close combat. The shooter taunted me, claiming I had been nicer before. I prepared myself as they charged. When they got close, I grabbed their wrist and attempted to sweep their legs. It didn't work, and they kicked me, causing me to stumble. They were skilled, but I was determined to outmatch them. I charged at them, faking a high attack before sliding to their side and managing to cut their arm. They laughed, liking their wound and commenting on its taste. As they charged again, I let them take me down. They asked if I had given up, but I just smiled. A gunshot rang out, and I saw their eyes widen in shock. I pushed them off me and called for Tsuyu to contact emergency services, informing her that I had shot the assailant but they were still alive and needed medical assistance. She nodded and pulled out her phone. I returned to the shooter, using their own pant leg to apply pressure to their wound. When I removed their mask, my eyes widened in disbelief. It was Toga. Looking into her eyes, I felt a mix of emotions. Despite everything, the memories of our past battles, friendships, and pain flooded back. Toga smiled at me, and I felt a sickening twist in my stomach. She should be in jail. I demanded to know where her allies were, but she feigned ignorance. Frustrated, I struck her with a left hook, insisting she knew exactly who I was talking about: Shigaraki, Dabi, and the rest. She looked genuinely shocked, claiming she had been released through the legal system and was now a government official. I examined her identification, surprised to find it legitimate. Confusion washed over me as I processed the implications. Just then, Ella called out, having witnessed the scene unfold. I explained that Toga was a government agent, but Ella questioned why she had attacked us if that were the case. Toga interrupted, explaining that there had been a miscommunication and that the officer had a bounty on him from the government. I shook my head in disbelief as I helped Toga to her feet. Tsuyu joined us, astonished to see Toga. Toga casually remarked that she had heard the word jail a lot that day. But listen, I should explain myself, so give me a moment. They all sat next to her, prepared for her story. She took a deep breath and began, deciding where to start. 5.5 years earlier. As she ran, every part of her ached. Everything they had built was crumbling, the League of Villains on the brink of collapse. Twice was gone, Dabi had suffered a breakdown and was taken into custody, Spinner and Mr. Compress had gone into hiding, and Shigaraki had been defeated in a major battle. She knew her time was running out. She could either be captured or face a fate worse than death, with no escape unless she could fly. She kept running, aware that they were closing in, but then someone landed in front of her. It was Pro-Hero Hawks. He pleaded with her to surrender. She felt tears welling up but masked them with fury. She accused him of killing twice and declared her intent to retaliate. With determination, she charged at him, her knife aimed for him, but he dodged swiftly. She slashed at him repeatedly, forcing him to stay on the move. Suddenly, she noticed his feathers being launched at her, putting her on the defensive. The battle continued, with her dodging and weaving, until she felt her socks begin to dampen. She made one final slash but missed, only to feel something pierce her abdomen. A feather had struck her, and she realized she had been hit. As she tried to rise, she knew it was over. Ichinghas were placed on her wrists, and warm tears streamed down her cheeks. 5 years earlier. The trial felt like an eternity, even though it had only been 6 months. She watched the days pass as the prosecutor detailed her numerous crimes, from murder to kidnapping and domestic terrorism, crimes that could lead to her execution. Now, she sat before the man who could confirm her fate. The judge addressed her, reminding her of the severity of her actions and the potential consequences of life imprisonment or the death penalty. She took a shaky breath and nodded, acknowledging the weight of his words. Everything around her seemed to freeze as the judge declared her guilty on all charges. The jury had decided her sentence, life in prison along with an additional 50 years. It was the moment she had dreaded, as the reality of her past caught up with her. She wished she had made better choices. The HNDCFFS clamped onto her wrists, and she was escorted out of the courtroom by officers in full protective gear. She knew where she was headed, Tartarus. 3 years earlier. After 2 years in a cell and extensive therapy, it felt as if my life was slowly piecing back together. Although I would never be a free woman, I was placed under less strict security. I spent my time reading books and gaining access to the internet. Even with the League of Villains gone, crime was still on the rise. It was odd but not shocking. What was shocking was the increase in violent crime. And there was still no sign of Izuku. My thoughts were interrupted when my cell door opened, revealing a man dressed in a suit, tall with a slowly graying head of hair. He introduced himself as Nobu Koizumi, the head of a government group known as the Japan's Info Agency, or JIA. Their mission was to prevent terrorist attacks before they occurred, easing the pressure on the S.A.T and police. With the rise in violent crime, they had decided to bring in an expert. I smiled at him, a smile I hadn't shown in a long time, and accepted his offer. Together, we would confront these threats. Current day. As she finished her story, I remained quiet for a moment before standing up. I expressed my hope for future cooperation and said goodnight. I quickly left the building with Tsu and Ella following me. We got back in the vehicle and began our trip back to UA. Deku's POV. As I looked out over the old campus I once attended, the smoke from my cigarette drifted upwards. Everything had been turned upside down. With Toga back, but now as a hero, it fractured my already distorted perspective of the world. I had always believed in fate, that a person's core could not change, but Toga had shown me that perhaps I was mistaken. Checking my old watch, I saw it was 2:34 a.m. I sighed and walked around the temporary barracks, careful not to wake my fellow soldiers, knowing how precious sleep could be. I slipped on my old boots and wandered the campus in search of peace. It was a beautiful night, with some windows around UA lit up, either by people working or other activities. As I walked, I heard footsteps approaching. It was none other than my former teacher, Aizawa. He noted that I was out late, and I acknowledged him in return. He remarked that he never expected me to become a smoker. I shrugged, then smiled slightly, explaining that in our line of work, life was uncertain, so I chose to live without regrets. He nodded, a small smile forming on his face. Curiously, he asked how I had been, which surprised me. Aizawa was usually stoic, and his genuine question was the most honest I had been asked in a long time. I replied that I was doing well alive, saving the world, and earning a decent living. He nodded again and shared that a lot had happened since I had been gone. Eri had started school, her quirk fully trained and extremely useful. Midnight and Lady had surprisingly started dating, and he was happy for them. I teased him about who had stolen his heart, and he revealed that Ms. Joke had managed to make him laugh without her quirk, leading him to realize he loved her. I was taken aback, impressed by his revelation. I congratulated him, patting him on the back, and noted that he seemed more rested. He shrugged, admitting it might be true. We both acknowledged our happiness, but I soon excused myself, needing to get some rest for the next day. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the thought of whether I was truly happy. This question lingered in my mind as I returned to the barracks. Climbing back into bed, I sighed, knowing I would soon be back to recruiting my old friends. I closed my eyes, hoping for a restful night. The next day, my eyes slowly opened to the sounds of the barracks, confirming everyone else was awake. I pushed myself up and looked around. Chairs were set up around a TV, where Grace, Emma, and Sam were seated. Alexander was cooking, while Hibana and Maresu played a card game. Sue, Ella, and Zofia were nowhere to be found. I approached the TV, which was showing news of a small terror attack in Finland. Sam informed me that Six had called about it, and everything was on lockdown with low civilian casualties. I nodded, asking if they had identified the attackers. Sam replied that they suspected it was an attempt by some nationalists to incite a civil war. He handed me his Zippo lighter, and I lit my cigarette with a nod of appreciation. Noticing Grace on her tablet, I asked if she wanted to go to the store with me. She agreed, curious about my reason. I explained that after finishing my recruiting run, I hoped to have a small party since the festival wasn't until Wednesday. She shrugged in agreement and went to change. I quickly changed myself, opting for a simple but nice outfit: a blue t-shirt, jeans, an old pair of Nikes, my watch, glasses, and a hat strapped to my belt. When I emerged, I saw Grace ready in a crop top, yellow jacket, short shorts, old high tops, earrings with her logo, and a beanie. Once we were both ready, I checked my phone for notifications and informed her that there was a small liquor shop about 5 minutes away. We set off, my mind racing with thoughts of what to grab. She nodded as she wrapped her arm around his shoulder. He looked up from his phone and shrugged, wondering what drinks they would get. He mentioned that he would find out when they arrived, suggesting some vodka, something fruity, and maybe some classic beers to keep it simple. Then he turned to Grace and asked about her fake glasses, having noticed them for the past year. She smiled and chuckled, explaining that she had worn them since year 6 as a way to get away with the pranks she pulled in school. She would set up her traps and then act innocent and nerdy when they worked. His eyes widened in surprise, realizing that her glasses were part of a long-running trick. Grace confirmed that it had turned into something she liked, so she never stopped wearing them. Before he could ask her more questions, they reached the store. As he walked in, it seemed unchanged. He headed to the back and grabbed a 30-pack of Natural Light. Looking around, he noticed Grace holding 2 bottles of vodka, a case of Fireball, and a bottle of Pink Whitney. They approached the counter and placed their items down. The girl behind the counter began scanning the drinks, and when she finished, he decided to ask for one more thing. He pointed to the vape juice behind the counter and requested a bottle of Kyberry yogurt juice. The woman grabbed it and scanned it, informing him of the total. He nodded and pulled out his credit card, quickly typing in his PIN. When the machine read, "Transaction approved," he nodded again, grabbing the Natural Light and a bag while Grace collected the rest. As they exited the store, her eyes went wide, and she exclaimed that she needed to grab something else, running back inside. He found it amusing that she had said "BRB" in a real conversation, but before he could dwell on it, she returned with a smile, apologizing that it was something small. He wanted to question her but decided against it, focusing instead on the alcohol in his hands. They began walking back, with Grace humming a song he couldn't quite identify. They quickly returned to the barracks, where he noticed that almost everyone was gone, except for him, Grace, and Sam. He put everything into the fridge while Grace walked over to her bed. He announced his intention to go to the gym, saying he would see them in about an hour. He then went to grab some training shorts, quickly changing into them along with a tank top. After that, he headed to the gym, ready for his daily training regimen. As the party commenced, the alcohol began to flow freely. The narrator felt a slight buzz, but most of the others were quite intoxicated. Sam and Zofia remained sober, while the whereabouts of Nock were unknown. Even the heroes, usually burdened with the weight of their responsibilities, were letting loose, seizing one of the rare opportunities to feel normal. The narrator considered themselves fortunate, enjoying a sense of freedom outside of missions, while the heroes were expected to maintain an image of perfection. Sipping on a natural light, the narrator was distracted by the loud music. They were seated on the couch beside Sam, who was watching over an unconscious Ella. Sam inquired about the planning of the event, to which the narrator explained that it was a successful mission, allowing them to enjoy cheaper drinks than in Britain. Sam then raised a concern about a potential terrorist attack the following day, prompting the narrator to respond that everyone needed to sober up quickly, as they would need to be alert. They both hoped that someone would have a quirk to help with that or that the alcohol would wear off in time. As they observed the lively crowd, Alexander approached, attempting to challenge the narrator to a drinking contest, though his words were slurred. The narrator politely declined, but Alexander insisted, leading them to a table where shot glasses awaited. Grace poured vodka into the glasses, and they both downed the first shot. As the contest progressed, the narrator found themselves 8 shots deep before Alexander finally fainted, declaring victory in a slurred triumph. Grace then beckoned the narrator to follow her into the barracks, where she locked the door behind them. She revealed that she had brought something special, but before anything could happen, the narrator's world faded to black. Upon waking, the narrator felt surprisingly clear-headed, despite the previous night's events. They noticed Grace asleep beside them, dressed casually. Exiting the room, they found the others nursing their hangovers, except for Sam and Zofia. Bakugo questioned how much he had consumed, and Sam humorously remarked that it was enough to incapacitate most. Sam reminded everyone that the festival was that day, and the narrator nodded, preparing for a challenging day ahead. Determined to wake everyone, the narrator changed into their combat outfit, securing their pistol and drone controls. They gathered Sam, Tachanka, and Zofia to discuss the mission. The narrator explained that the heroes would likely complicate matters, especially Bakugo, and outlined a plan for each operator's role during the festival. They emphasized the importance of keeping the students safe, warning that any harm would mean failure. After a few hours, the narrator stepped away from the main festivities to light a cigarette. Bakugo joined them, and they shared a moment of silence. Bakugo asked where the narrator had gone after leaving the party, and the narrator inquired about the trouble Bakugo had faced. Bakugo revealed that he had accidentally caused a civilian's death, a revelation that weighed heavily on him. The narrator reassured him that he would be out of Japan for a while. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the radio, calling for help. The narrator and Bakugo exchanged glances, readying themselves for action. They quickly moved to guide the confused students toward the gym, preparing for whatever chaos awaited them. Repeat, follow Dynamite to the gym. The call rang out, and a radio was pulled out. The plan was to round up with Dekibi and Twitch in 5 minutes, moving the students to safety. Tachanka, Froppy, and Zofia were summoned to meet at the gym. Rushing toward the large group of confused students, the urgency of the situation was palpable. Pushing through the crowd, a small stage was climbed, and a microphone was quickly grabbed. Tapping it to gain attention, the message was delivered with conviction. Everyone, the school is under attack. Please follow me and Dynamite to the gym now. As the teachers began to lead their students, Dynamite and the speaker positioned themselves at the back, ready for any threats. Upon reaching the gym, Zofia, Tachanka, and Froppy were already waiting. The atmosphere was tense, and the gravity of the situation was clear. You 3 must not let a single intruder into this room. No matter what happens outside, these students will survive, the speaker instructed, locking eyes with the soldiers and hero. A glance was exchanged with Tachanka, who was reminded to call the students to fight if the worst occurred. "May we see each other on the other side," was the parting sentiment. "Of course, comrade. May we share a drink on the other side," Tachanka replied, preparing his weapon. Nodding at Dynamite, they both rushed back to the battlefield. Gunshots echoed like school bells, and the speakers spotted Ella behind a small wall. Sliding next to her, they both readied themselves. "Any updates on outside military assistance?" "A Black Hawk would be helpful," the speaker inquired, noting the enemy fire hitting the concrete barrier. Ella responded, a hint of frustration in her tone. "Last I checked, they had 2 APCs, a tank, and your beloved Black Hawk, 7 minutes. Acknowledging her with a nod, the speaker introduced Dynamite to Ella, playfully noting their complicated friendship. Bakugo seemed momentarily distracted by the green-haired Polish girl, prompting a gentle reminder of their current situation. "So, Ella, how many Grzmot mines do you have?" the speaker asked while retrieving the drone controls from the bag. Ella's expression indicated she understood the plan. 6. "Are you really planning to use them?" A smile and nod confirmed the intent. "Let's load them onto the drone and drop them on the enemies." As they worked together to attach the mines, the drone was activated, humming to life as it ascended into the sky. Counting down, the anticipation built. 3, 2, 1. And with that, the drone soared toward the crowd of intruders. The sound of the Grzmot mines detonating in rapid succession echoed loudly. The urgency of the situation prompted a quick command to move forward. As the protagonist rounded the corner, ready to aim the M4, an unexpected sensation wrapped around their neck. A tentacle tightened its grip, and panic surged through them. Struggling to reach the small combat knife strapped to their belt, they noticed Ella firing into a small crowd while Bakugo launched himself into the air, preparing a powerful attack. Finally managing to grasp the knife, the protagonist swiftly cut through the tentacle, causing both them and the appendage to crash to the ground. Gasping for breath, they retrieved their M4 just as Bakugo unleashed a blast that sent bodies flying into the air. The protagonist joined in the fray, firing at the crowd as they rushed toward Ella. Grateful yet breathless, they expressed their thanks for her assistance, their heart racing from the close call. Fear lingered in their mind, but there was no time to dwell on it. The battle raged on, and the situation felt relentless. Ella, focused and determined, quickly reloaded her weapon as explosions erupted around them. The sounds of various powers clashed in the chaos. The protagonist leaned around the corner, firing a quick shot as more attacks struck the wall. Realizing the precariousness of their position, the protagonist urged Ella to retreat, knowing the wall wouldn't hold much longer. They were low on ammunition, and the extraction helicopter was still a considerable distance away. Ella, glancing back, acknowledged the urgency, aware that her current magazine was nearly empty. Desperate for reinforcements, the protagonist grabbed their radio and called for assistance, detailing their dire situation. Bakugo continued to unleash blasts, but the strain was evident. As they turned the corner to fire again, a few more enemies fell, a grim sight they had grown accustomed to. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life with an update. Reinforcements were on the way, with military units en route to their location. Bakugo landed beside them just as the sound of helicopter blades filled the air, providing cover fire against the advancing enemies. The protagonist joined the assault, targeting the fleeing terrorists as chaos ensued. After a tense few minutes, the gunfire subsided, replaced by the rumble of trucks and armored vehicles arriving. Emerging from their cover, the protagonist was approached by a military officer who introduced himself as Sergeant Landover. He reported significant casualties among the terrorists, though many had managed to escape. The few captured would face justice, with plans for extradition for the higher-ranking members. After shaking hands with Landover, the protagonist made their way back to the barracks, contemplating the endless thoughts swirling in their mind as they prepared for the next phase of their mission. A month had passed since Japan. There were no missions, and as I walked through the empty halls at 2 in the morning on a Wednesday, I focused on training the heroes. None of them had ever fired a gun. The air felt cold and tense. Night Haven had left, and while it shouldn't have hurt, it did. James, Jack, Monica, and Lena were gone, And while that was disappointing, it didn't affect me too much. But Ella? Someone I had trusted and considered a friend. Just a month ago, she had fought alongside me behind that stone wall. Gone. That word echoed in my mind. Someone I had confided in, someone I respected, was gone. My trust in anyone I considered a friend was now shaken. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced since I was young. Entering the cafeteria, I spotted Ryad sitting alone. I took a seat across from him, and silence enveloped us. Insomnia had become a constant companion. I noticed a small backpack next to him, and when our eyes met, we both glanced at the bag. He reached inside, pulling out a pack of cards and a small box of fruit snacks. Without exchanging words, he handed me a pack, and we set up a game of rummy. 2 hours passed, and we tied, but an unspoken bond formed between us, a strange yet comforting connection. As we cleaned up the game, preparing to return to our dorms, he broke the silence. "Same time next week?" he asked, placing the items back in his bag. "Sure. I'll bring the snacks next time," I replied. Who knew wounds could heal so quickly? That morning was loud again. Conversations about Night Haven, departures, double agents, and casual banter filled the air. Rainbow felt like high school, with cliques forming, old friends reuniting, and rivalries reigniting under the pressure of fighting global threats. "Izuku, my friend? Did you not sleep last night?" Timur asked, taking a sip of his water. Grace then turned her attention to me. "Up late last night scrolling through the internet?" she teased, trying to break through my tough exterior. Just then, Matsi took a seat next to me, placing his tray of food down. "Give the kid a break, Grace. He just lost a friend," Matsi said, turning to me and placing a hand on my shoulder. "If you want, later on, I'll get the dirt bikes all gassed up and we can go for a ride." I sped through the dirt track not far from the base, a public one. I loved these moments with Matsi. As I raced, I watched him pull ahead. "Come on, kid, I even gave you the faster bike." "Nervous or something?" he laughed. I removed my helmet, a smile on my face. We rode over to a little spot and sat down at a picnic table. I bought us a plate of nachos and 2 waters, tossing one to him, having lost the bet from the race. He looked at me, a more serious expression on his face. "Izuku, are you good, mate?" he asked. It was the first time someone had asked me that. A slight twinge formed in my chest. Yeah, I guess. With the whole Night Haven split and the heroes I'm training, it's just stressful, I admitted, taking a sip of my water. "Glass houses and small stones, Izuku. You need to settle down a bit. The only reason you're training those heroes is that you know them. But you're letting that consume your mind. When Ella and the others left, it felt like you lost a good friend. But clearly she wasn't that great. This stress you're feeling will pass. You have friends here for you, Timur, Marisol, Yumiko, Grace, and of course, the greatest of them all, me." He took a sip of his water. "Grace even asked me to check on you. She really cares about you. When she heard Ella left, she came to me and Tori, asking how you were holding up." I was taken aback. Grace and I were friends, good friends, in fact. But we were the kind of friends who teased each other and enjoyed each other's company without worrying about personal issues unless they were shared. Maybe I had misread our friendship all along. Perhaps that had been my issue the entire time. Superheroes like Katsuki, Dynamite, Bakugo, Froppy, Azui, Shoto Todoroki, Rumi, Miriko, Usajiyama, Ijiro, Red Riot, Kirishima, and Ochako, Uravity, Uraraka struggled to eject the pistol magazine during training. "How did you all manage to ensure the gun was loaded if you got it from a villain?" I asked, leaning back in the small plastic chair. Today was supposed to be target practice, but it had turned into basic training once again. "Well, Zuku, we usually let the police handle this. Plus, with our quirks, we don't really have to worry about this stuff." Uraraka replied with a bright smile. Back, annoyed, before standing up and walking to the door. "I'm going to talk to Harry," I said, closing the door gently behind me as I headed toward his office. A month had passed since my conversation with Matsi. I glanced out a window as I walked by, watching raindrops run down the glass. November 14th. The American operators had gone home to celebrate Thanksgiving with their families, as had the Brazilians. I reached Harry's office and knocked on the door. "Come in," he called. I opened the door and walked in. "Ah, Izuku, what brings you in?" he asked as I took a seat inside. "Someone else needs to take over training the heroes. They don't see me as an equal. They don't view any of us as equals, except, surprisingly, Katsuki. It might be smarter to work them in groups, led by one of their own." I spoke honestly as he placed a cup of tea in front of me. "To be honest, Izuku, you're right. They sit amongst themselves. In training exercises with recruits, they often didn't give their all. If someone believed Mr. Bakugo could lead them, that was their choice. However, a favor was requested. A training match was set up, 6 heroes versus a team of their choosing. It would be 6 against 6. The recruits hadn't trained with the best yet, and it was time for them to learn. The heroes were tasked with protecting the hostage, Matsi, who was dressed in a suit for 10 minutes. A voice echoed over the loudspeakers, announcing the rules. The heroes were reminded that they could use their phones to check the cameras both inside and outside. They needed to ensure the operators did not reach the hostage. Both teams had 5 minutes to strategize. The defenders would win if they eliminated all the operators or protected the hostage for the full 10 minutes. The attackers knew their objective. If they were hit 3 times, they were out. If they were caught in an explosion, stabbed, or knocked out in any way, they were out as well. Good luck was wished to both teams. As the time ticked down, Miriko found the training exercise absurd. She walked around the old building, observing her teammates, Todoroki and Red Riot, as they prepared. When the 5 minutes were up, she laughed loudly, mocking the operators. Suddenly, she noticed something small land at her feet. An explosion erupted, coinciding with Hibana setting off her pellets, which helped cover the entrance as Deku and Dakibi breached through the top-story window. They quickly moved into a small room, hearing chaos from down the hall. Deku rolled out a small drone, sweeping every room until they located the operators. He grabbed his radio, chuckling as he relayed their position. In the master bedroom, he instructed Montague, Fuse, and Nock to ascend the stairs while keeping shields up for Nock. Hibana was to enter through the window. He tossed his phone into the hallway before turning to Dakibi, signaling her to call it. Footsteps approached, and he peeked around the corner, spotting Froppy. He took aim and fired, hitting her with chalk rounds as she fell to the ground. Meanwhile, Bakugo sat with only 3 of them left. The Australian teammate laughed, taunting them about their supposed superiority. Bakugo shouted back, trying to provoke them into rushing in for a brawl. Todoroki, using his quirk, froze off other entrances to secure their position. He spoke in a monotone voice, explaining that they had only 3 minutes left and that they needed to hold their ground. Suddenly, a small cylinder was tossed into the room, and Bakugo realized the danger too late. A bright light filled the space, followed by a ringing sound as the doorway opened. Hours later, Deku found himself in a hospital room, surrounded by injured heroes. Rumi had a broken rib, and Tsuyu was bruised from the shots she had taken. Headaches plagued those who were awake, while others, including Ochako, Bakugo, Todoroki, and Kirishima, were knocked out. Deku watched through a small window as the doctor checked on them. Harry approached and placed a hand on Deku's shoulder, commenting on their lack of control and overconfidence. Deku interrupted, expressing his belief in Harry's plan but noting that the recruits were unprepared for a situation where their quirks wouldn't simply save them. They were up against skilled opponents who had learned to fight and would do anything for their cause. He sighed, rubbing his temples, realizing that his emotions would hinder his ability to train them effectively. He decided to hand them over to Sam, who would be more capable of breaking through their barriers. With that, he walked away, hoping the hero project would ultimately succeed. Later, he found himself questioning why he had agreed to join Grace as she led him to her dorm. She teased him about missing their time together. Upon entering, they were greeted by Timur, who was excitedly setting up a game console. He announced the games they could play, and Deku quickly settled onto the couch beside him. As they prepared to play, Timur handed Deku a small flask, and after taking a sip, he coughed at the strength of the drink. Grace proposed a challenge. Whoever won 10 races in Mario Kart would choose the food they ordered. The game began, demanding all of Deku's focus. An hour later, they sat together, enjoying fried chicken and drinks. Grace referred to their meal as chimake, while Deku thought of it as pre-hangover food. Mirio, feeling the effects of his drink, complained about his flushed face. Timur playfully suggested he put down the bottle, and the two began exchanging friendly banter in their respective languages. Deku smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie he hadn't experienced in days. A small craving struck, prompting Izuku to stand up from the couch. He mentioned that he was going to step outside for a moment, inviting anyone who wanted to join him for a chat. The two other guys were still engaged in their playful banter, while Grace also stood up. They made their way to the roof, where silence enveloped them, a welcome companion. Izuku led Grace to his favorite spot on the roof, where two old sun-bleached lawn chairs awaited. The sun was setting on the horizon as he took a seat, gazing at the view. He retrieved his lighter from his pocket, pulled out a cigarette, placed it between his lips, and cupped his hands around it to ignite the end. Inhaling deeply, he felt the smoke fill his lungs before exhaling. Grace remarked that the habit was harmful, expressing her desire to keep him around so she could continue to beat him in Mario Kart. Izuku glanced at the beer she held, responding that her choice wasn't much better. Noticing a slight flush on her cheeks, he wondered if he had missed it before due to his own inebriation. Grace chuckled, admitting that her flush wasn't as pronounced as her parents'. When she asked if he experienced the same, he shrugged, explaining that neither he nor his mother showed any signs of it, attributing it to genetics. He took another drag from his cigarette, disliking the taste but finding it calming. Suddenly, he felt it slip from his lips as Grace playfully slapped it out of his mouth. Frustrated, he lamented that it was one of his last cigarettes and expressed his reluctance to go to the store just yet. He caught a glimpse of her familiar smirk, which made his heart skip a beat, and despite his annoyance, he couldn't stay mad. With a resigned sigh, he suggested they head back inside. They returned to her dorm in silence, but Izuku could feel his heart racing, like a drum in a marching band, quickening with each step. As they reached the dorm, the tension eased, and the door opened to reveal the two men wrestling on the ground. Timur was playfully keeping Mirio in a chokehold, and Izuku couldn't help but laugh at the sight, joined by Grace. After some time had passed, Grace surveyed the room, noticing Timur and Mirio asleep upright on the couch while Izuku lay on the floor, knocked out. A smile spread across her face as she looked at her friends, especially at Izuku. She walked over, gently lifting him with a slight grunt and placing him in her bed before letting out a soft sigh. She whispered to herself, wishing Izuku felt the same way about her as she did for him. His obliviousness was frustrating, and she pondered whether he was simply afraid of losing everything again. Leaning down, she placed a gentle kiss on his cheek, hoping that one day she would find the courage to express her feelings. For now, she lay down next to him, turning her body away, and whispered a quiet goodnight to him. Chapter end. As the door swung open, the scene inside sent a chill down my spine. Harry sat slumped in his chair, a bullet wound visible on his chest. Rushing over, I pressed my fingers to his neck, but there was no pulse. He was cold, and the stain on his shirt told a grim story. Panic surged through me as I shouted for help, my voice echoing in the room. Mike burst in, his expression one of shock. "Bloody hell," he managed to say, taking in the scene. Rainbow had been attacked on its own turf, and questions flooded my mind. Who could have done this? And what? I sat in my dorm, grappling with the reality that the man who had recruited me to Rainbow was dead, gunned down in his own office. Trust felt like a distant memory. Just 2 nights ago, I thought things were settling into a new normal, but now everything felt uncertain. Was one of our heroes a double agent? I gripped my pistol tightly, paranoia creeping in. Someone was working with the group responsible for this attack, and they were already inside, entrenched among us. I could only hope someone would uncover the truth before we faced a long, dark year ahead. Grace reviewed the security footage, searching for any clues. The card reader data showed nothing unusual. It was as if the intruder had evaded all the cameras. It shouldn't have been possible without some kind of quirk, yet there was no sign of anyone entering. As she clicked through the footage, she spotted a recruit opening the door at 2:46 a.m. It seemed harmless enough, but leaving the door open was a risk. The face of the recruit remained hidden. Switching to the camera outside the office, she noted the door opening and closing again at 2. At 3:12, Seamus exited the building, providing an opportunity for the intruder to escape. Whoever this was, they knew exactly what they were after. War had been declared, but by whom? In a dimly lit room, a masked figure raised a glass in celebration. "Cheers," he exclaimed, clinking glasses with a companion. "To the New World Order." The man across from him, sporting a southern accent, responded, "Yes, it is. Happy we could put Rainbow on the back foot for you." The masked figure laughed, feeling the power of the moment. They believed he was gone, but he had merely been waiting for the right time to strike. Izuku sat on his couch, engrossed in the television, when he heard a soft knock at the door. Peering through the peephole, he recognized Sam and opened the door. Sam placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, sensing the tension radiating from him. They were all trying to make sense of the chaos, but Izuku's anxiety was palpable. Sam urged him to focus on calming down and finding clarity. Seeking solace, Izuku wandered into the woods, yearning for peace of mind. Was it even possible in his line of work? The weight of his past pressed down on him, his mother raising a quirkless son, his failures, the loss of friends to betrayal. Overwhelmed, he let out a scream that echoed through the trees. After what felt like an eternity, he regained his breath, only to be startled by a voice behind him. It was Yumiko, who had approached quietly. "You scared me, Yumiko," he admitted, chuckling nervously. She sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Yumiko expressed concern for his mental health, suggesting he take a break. Izuku knew she was right, but he felt trapped by his responsibilities. They both carried their burdens, and he acknowledged her struggles with Jack. Yumiko encouraged him to prioritize self-care, but Izuku felt lost. He had trained relentlessly for years, first to be a hero and then to be a soldier. Now, everything felt out of his control. Tears threatened to spill as he confessed his feelings of being adrift. Yumiko offered him a sympathetic smile, assuring him he would find his way one day. With that, she stood up and walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Meanwhile, Sam and Yumiko sat together, sipping coffee as they reviewed Izuku's psychological evaluation. Yumiko expressed her regret for recruiting him at such a young age, but Sam reminded her that Izuku had chosen this path. He was intelligent and just needed the right guidance. Yet, uncertainty lingered in Sam's mind about whether Izuku could truly save himself. All they could do was hope he would find his way. Chapter End. Izuku lay in bed, feeling exhausted and stressed. He rolled over and grabbed his old laptop, attempting to find something to watch but feeling lost in a sea of options. A sigh escaped him as he grappled with the loneliness that surrounded him. He knew he was partly to blame, but trust felt like a fragile thing in a world turned upside down. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the many names of other operators, friends, and family. A sigh escaped me as I rolled over. Everything felt so complicated at that moment. I glanced back at my phone and noticed a new notification from Grace, causing my heart to skip a beat. I opened the message, which read, "You know, 3 days locked in your room isn't healthy." I simply responded with a thumbs-up emoji. I wasn't angry with her or anyone else. I felt scared? I wasn't sure if that was the right term. The phone buzzed again, repeatedly. What was happening? I expected messages from Grace, but instead, there were 3 from Maresu and 1 from Timur. I opened Timur's message, which said, "Izuku, they think you killed Harry." Another message followed, "Run, dude." The last one warned, "They have Sledge, Cav, Ash, Hibana, and Doc coming to get you." I didn't respond. I quickly checked what Timur had said next. Dirt bike started right in the woods. Don't wait. Just as I was about to ask what was going on, a knock came at my door. Ash was outside, knocking heavily. She called out for me to come out, and I heard shuffling in my room. "In just a second, all right." I yelled back. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. Sledge grunted and took his hammer, swinging it to knock the door in. As we looked around, there was no sign of me except for my phone, which had been broken, and my laptop, which was completely dismantled. Sledge noticed the hard drive was missing. Though it didn't prove I committed a crime, it certainly didn't help my case. Then Ash pointed to the open window. I had escaped. Echo and Timur rushed to Grace's door, knocking urgently. When it opened, they found Valkyrie, Blackbeard, Vigil, and Kibi standing there. They were caught. Dakibi looked furious. Before Echo could react, Glaz turned and ran. Just as Echo decided to follow, something struck her in the side of the head, and her vision faded to darkness. Glaz made it outside and dashed toward the woods. Fortunately, no one saw him escape until he came across Deku and Matsi. They exchanged worried glances. Glaz gasped, realizing he had made himself a wanted criminal by fleeing. Matsi shook his head and walked over to a hidden spot where an ATV was stashed. You and I are going to ride the ATV, mate. Toss your phone. Glaz hopped onto the ATV, feeling it start, and they sped away. Echo woke up to water splashed on her face. Looking around, she found herself surrounded by Ash, Hibana, Dabi, Doc, Thermite, Caviera, and Zero. They all wore expressions of disdain, except for Zero, who seemed skeptical about the situation. Hibana leaned in closer, demanding to know why Echo had helped me. Echo struggled against her restraints, insisting that I was innocent. She argued passionately, recalling how I would have sacrificed everything for everyone in the room. Caviria stepped forward, revealing that Nox's device had been found at the gun range, along with a missing pistol and suppressor. Frustrated, Echo pleaded with them, insisting they didn't have to do this. But the towel was thrown over her face, and she knew she had to endure until I could prove my innocence. In an abandoned warehouse, I sat with Matsi, feeling the chill of the British winter. Matsi rubbed his arms to warm up and asked if I knew why they were accusing me. I shook my head, feeling the weight of the situation. Timur explained that a pistol, suppressor, and Nox device were missing, with only the device found at the gun range. I expressed my frustration, knowing I hadn't done anything wrong. I respected Harry, just as everyone else did. I felt sorry for dragging my friends into this mess. Max nudged me playfully, assuring me they believed I was innocent. He added that if I weren't, then they would be disappointed, but they all knew I was. I smiled back, but then I asked who else believed in my innocence. Max hesitated and Timur coughed. Me, Max, Masru, and Sam, he said. One name was missing and it stung. Grace, Nam had lost her trust in me, and that shook me to my core. Max noticed my discomfort but chose not to say anything. For now, we had a moment of peace, but I knew a storm was coming. I was left alone in the cold room, my clothes drenched. Everyone had left hours ago. I knew Grace was searching through my phone, likely looking for evidence against me. Suddenly, the door opened, and a figure stepped in. I squinted against the light and saw my ex, Shu Mei Lin. I pleaded with her, insisting I didn't know where anyone had gone. To my surprise, she looked at me with pity rather than anger. Oh, Maurice, she said, walking over and quickly cutting my restraints. Sam instructed someone to fetch me and take me to his office for a discussion. She pulled out the HNDCFFS and secured them on my wrists. I chuckled lightly, recalling a past incident. The last time we had done something similar, I had been stuck for 2 days. I braced myself for a potential hit, but instead, I heard a small chuckle from her. Despite the tension from our breakup, she admitted to missing the way I made her laugh. Before long, we arrived at Sam Fisher's office. He regarded me with a slight grimace. Murray, Shu, sit down, he commanded, and we complied without hesitation. A small smile appeared on his face as he continued. Welcome to Operation Lost Wings. Unfortunately, the news of our 3 operators going AWOL has reached the Security Council, and they will soon be sending a new 6 over. Fortunately, they also seem to agree that Izuku is not responsible for Harry's death. However, since he is AWOL, we must assemble a team to locate them. He handed Shu a card with a phone number and a flip phone. You 2 are also going to go AWOL. That phone number is for Karen Bowman, a CIA agent who led an operation in Bolivia that resulted in the capture of El Sueno. Call her, she will arrange for 5 fake passports and IDs for you. Head to Singapore. The 3 men are currently in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Worcester. Good luck, soldiers. With that, Shu unlocked my HNDCFFS, and we hurried to an old truck that was running, setting off to assist our abandoned ally. Izuku sat on a small plane, now under the name Kenji Katagawa, a small-time businessman. The real reason for their presence in Singapore was to prove his innocence. He glanced at his wrist, still sore from events 2 days prior. Max sat beside him and called over the flight attendant, requesting a shot of whiskey. As she walked away, Izuku turned to gaze out the window, sighing at the realization that the hunt was on and time was running short. 16 hours earlier, in the warehouse, they were awakened by a knock at the small door. Izuku shot up, gripping his pistol tightly. Max and Timur quickly found hiding spots behind old oil drums. Peeking through the slightly cracked door, he saw Maresu and Shu. He quickly opened the door, a small, tired smile on his face. Shu apologized for startling him, while Maresu offered a brief hug. They gathered in an old break room and took their seats. Timur broke the silence, asking what they were doing there. He opened a small flask filled with water, and Izuku listened intently for their response. Operation Lost Wings. We're heading to Singapore to prove your innocence, Izuku, Maresu explained, glancing at Max. The only problem is, I have no idea what we should be looking for. I wish we had a hacker on our side. Izuku sighed in agreement. Maresu then pulled out a phone, stating they needed to call a CIA agent named Bowman. She slid the flip phone to him, which already had a number saved. He dialed, and after a few rings, a strict voice answered, identifying him as Izuku Midoriya. The woman sounded impatient as she informed him that her agent was already on the way. She mentioned that he owed her a favor, which would come later, and asked if he had heard of the Carice Legion. When he admitted he had not, she laughed lightly, explaining that Carice Legion was a new and emerging super-terrorist group. She shared that their leader was believed to be named Daimas, with a lieutenant named Ryan Tan. She instructed them to meet at Red's dinner in Singapore and warned him to leave the phone in the warehouse to avoid detection. After the call ended, a man entered the break room, tossing down 5 sets of passports and IDs, along with tickets to Singapore. He wished them good luck in a thick southern drawl before leaving. Hours passed as Grace tracked the location of every phone call within a 75-mile radius, but nothing unusual appeared. She whispered to herself, questioning Izuku's whereabouts. Hurt and confused, she recalled how he had killed Harry, a friend who had never wronged him. She took a sip of water, trying to clear her mind. Just then, there was a knock at her door. Sighing, she opened it slightly to find Bakugo standing there. Without hesitation, he barged into her room and locked the door behind him. He asserted that Izuku was innocent, and they both knew it. Grace scoffed, returning her focus to her laptop. She insisted that the evidence pointed to Izuku as the likely culprit, given his behavior. Bakugo, however, argued that he had known Izuku longer than anyone else and that he would never commit such an act, especially after losing someone he trusted. Grace's anger flared as she confronted him about the past, recalling how he had bullied Izuku and caused him pain. Bakugo countered, stating that she was no better for abandoning Izuku when he needed support the most. He expressed his desire to atone for his past actions, challenging her to do the same before turning away in frustration. A few operators, along with the heroes, were set to be part of the hunting team for the group that had gone AWOL. The door slammed shut, causing a slight jump. Was it true? Was the narrator now no better than the person who had bullied him for years? Thoughts were interrupted by a ping from the laptop, a call from a warehouse. Hesitation lingered about informing Eliza, but a sigh escaped as fingers tapped on the desk. Finally, the call was made. Ash was instructed to get the group ready, as a location of interest had been identified. Izuku quickly tossed a match into the old warehouse as he climbed into the truck that Masaru and Shu had taken. Within moments, the building was engulfed in flames. Timur, gazing out the window, remarked that there would be no evidence left behind. Izuku nodded in agreement as they headed toward Heathrow. 3 hours later, Masaru urged everyone not to be late for the plane. They rushed through airport security, leaving their weapons in the truck, including Izuku's beloved P226. At the boarding gate, tickets were handed over, and they managed to reach their seats. Shu and Murasu sat behind Izuku, Timur, and Max. Trying to get comfortable without any means of protection felt unsettling. Noticing Izuku's discomfort, Timur nudged him, reassuring him that everything would work out. Izuku managed a small smile in response, hoping for a swift resolution to their situation. Meanwhile, Grace watched in shock as the building burned. Firefighters struggled against the flames while Bakugo chuckled at the scene. Other heroes, including Valkyrie, Tuba Rao, and Sens, attempted to help extinguish the fire. Bakugo nudged Grace, suggesting that the one responsible was smarter than they realized. Grace shot him a side-eye and speculated that perhaps the individual had a quirk that had been overlooked or suppressed by bullying. Bakugo leaned in, noting that despite her anger, she had defended the person, indicating her subconscious belief in their innocence. Grace wished she could dismiss his words but found herself questioning everything. Suddenly, a voice called out to her, jolting her awake and causing her to hit her head on the top bunk. Commander Ku stood over her, accusing her of hacking into Rainbow servers. Grace awoke again, this time actually hitting her head. She sighed in frustration as Bakugo entered, noticing her discomfort. He wanted to discuss Izuku, but Grace rolled her eyes, feeling conflicted. She wanted to believe in Izuku's innocence, but the evidence seemed to point in the opposite direction. Bakugo's past actions in Japan hung over their conversation, and Grace couldn't resist taunting him about it. After he left, she turned to her computer, checking the weather for Singapore. They had requested airport footage and saw Izuku rushing onto the plane with a small group of AWOL soldiers. Now, in a city of 4 million, they waited for a mistake. Scanning through cameras, she spotted a diner called Red's Diner and noticed 5 people exiting at once. The wind blew, knocking off a hat, revealing a flash of green hair. Grace felt a surge of determination. She was going to find Izuku and get answers. Izuku sat in a circle booth, tapping his fingers on the table, lost in thought. He wondered if Grace was searching for him, but quickly dismissed the notion, remembering she was part of the hunt. Murasu noticed his distracted expression, but before he could inquire, a blonde woman sat beside Izuku. She introduced herself and handed him a folder containing information about a CIA asset named Marcus Coleman, an ex-Marine turned gunrunner. She instructed him to meet Coleman at a local flower shop called Coleman's Flowers. As the group prepared to leave, Bowman pulled Izuku aside, urging him to eliminate Ryan after gathering the necessary information. With a new flip phone in hand, Izuku nodded and joined the others, but as they exited, a gust of wind blew his baseball cap off, revealing a traffic camera aimed in their direction. DB was on the hunt. An hour later, Izuku approached the flower shop, greeted by a large man with a bushy beard and a warm smile. After handing over the folder, the man confirmed that Bowman had mentioned him and led Izuku to the back. There, he revealed a hidden door that opened to a staircase. Izuku descended, his eyes widening at the sight of the arsenal waiting below. From a Lapa FA-03 and PP-90 to classics like Glocks and Mossberg shotguns, he asked what type of flowers they were looking for while searching the room in awe. Clearing his throat, he finally spoke up, expressing his interest in a breaching shotgun. The bearded man walked over to a smaller shotgun and placed it down, introducing the Remington 870 and assuring him he would provide the proper rounds. He then suggested that something easy to conceal but still powerful would be ideal, and the man nodded, retrieving 3 FDC-9s along with 3 suppressors. He explained that while the shotgun was for emergencies, the FDC-9s would be more useful for his stealthy operations, followed by a hearty laugh. He mentioned wanting an Otis-03 suppressed, and the man quickly fetched it from another wall. He also requested a mix of sidearms, leaving the selection up to the bearded man, who smiled broadly in agreement. As they wrapped up, the man informed him that if he was ready to go, he would drop off the bouquet at Red's Diner, where Bowman would hold it for him. "Just show up at 6 p.m., he said. Nodding in acknowledgement, he returned to their base of operations, an old apartment rented for their use. Upon entering, he found Murasu and Shu engaged in conversation while Max and Timur played cards. He settled into the small bedroom, passing the time by watching old television shows. As the clock approached 6, he quickly changed into a pair of shorts and a hoodie, announcing his intention to pick up a gift before heading out. Rushing to the diner, he entered to find Bowman seated at a booth with a duffel bag beside her. She complimented his choice of clothing, suggesting he looked like a gym rat, which suited the bag's contents. She remarked that he would make a great member of the Ghost, having reviewed his records. While they weren't extraordinary, there was something about him that hinted at a cold-blooded killer in the making. He felt unable to respond as he took the bag from her. She urged him to consider the offer, and he nodded, leaving the diner with her words echoing in his mind. He questioned whether he was truly a cold-blooded killer. Suddenly, he was pulled into an alleyway, a pistol aimed at his head, his custom-made P226. The sunlight obscured his vision momentarily until he recognized the familiar black braids and the hints of white in her hair. Stuttering, he managed to ask if it was Grace. She demanded to know if he had killed Harry, her cold tone sending a chill through him. He felt his breath catch as he assured her he could never do such a thing. Grace covered his mouth with her hand, and after a moment, she sighed and sat beside him on the concrete. She expressed her belief in his innocence but insisted they needed to talk, her serious tone unfamiliar to him. She pressed for clarity on the situation, and he zipped up the duffel bag containing his weapons, nodding in response to her questions. Grace remarked that it sounded like a fever dream, and he sighed, wishing it were merely a dream. As he stood up, he felt the weight of the bag and her concern about whether he truly needed to eliminate the threat. He expressed his reluctance to anger the CIA and asked for his gun back, but she refused, explaining that its disappearance would raise suspicion. He sighed again, contemplating the hope that his life would return to peace after this ordeal. Grace called out after him, assuring him she was on his side and would try to delay anyone searching for him, urging him to stay safe. After a 20-minute walk, he returned to the apartment, where everyone turned to him expectantly. He simply stated that Grace had found him, causing their expressions to shift in surprise. Maresu approached, placing a hand on his shoulder, and asked if she had betrayed him. He shook his head, and Maresu chuckled in relief. As he sat down, Timur inquired about their plans to find the target. He pulled out his phone, stating they would act once they received a call with an ID on him. Grace returned to the small commando base they were using, a modest house in a quieter part of the city. Upon entering, she found Bakugo and the other heroes in conversation. They turned to her before shifting their focus back to Bakugo, and Tsuyu approached her with a polite request to talk. Grace nodded, and they moved to a more private area. Leaning against the wall, Tsuyu expressed that the heroes, excluding Bakugo, believed Izuku was guilty but assured her they were on her side. Grace felt her throat tighten, struggling to respond until she managed to express her gratitude, though it felt forced. She wanted to defend Izuku and proclaim his innocence, but she knew that siding with him could jeopardize her future. In the frustrated, she retreated to her shared room, throwing herself onto the bed. Grabbing a pillow, she screamed into it, overwhelmed by her emotions. A burning sensation coursed through me, intense and overwhelming. I stopped the screaming, and when I removed the pillow, I saw Bakugo looking at me with confusion. I glared at him as he shut the door behind him. He leaned against the door and asked what was next. I questioned why it mattered to him before walking over. He remained still, without a smirk on his face. He mentioned it was about Izuku and expressed his desire to know what was happening. I informed him that Izuku was here and that they were on the hunt. Izuku had set the phone down and was eating leftovers from dinner while Maresu and Shu were in the shared bedroom with the music turned up loud. Eventually, he put the food aside and walked into the small living room where Max was curled up, murmuring to himself about never wanting to open that door. Timur sat on the couch, focused on the small television. Izuku commented on Max's situation, but he was interrupted when the phone rang. He quickly pulled it out of his pocket and answered it. Bowman's voice came through, informing him that Ryan had been identified. He was in a 2021 BMW 338i, heading toward a suspected Carice Legion facility on Jurong Island. She assured him there was time to reach Ryan, as someone was following him. She warned that Rainbow had just discovered Ryan and wanted to extract him for information, reminding Izuku of their deal. Ryan couldn't get out alive. Izuku acknowledged her words, assuring her it would be handled before ending the call. Grace was seated, monitoring the cameras, waiting for a sign of Izuku or something else, when Eliza burst in, putting on her vest. She instructed Grace to get ready for a new mission, revealing that a new terrorist group had come onto their radar. They had a chance to capture a high-ranking member named Ryan Tan, codename Prometheus, and suspected Izuku might be involved. The door closed behind Eliza as Grace sighed and walked over to her gear. She thought to herself that she would see Izuku even sooner and grabbed her beanie, preparing for the confrontation. Izuku Midoriya found himself at a crossroads, contemplating the next chapter of his life. With the monotony of daily routines weighing on him, he felt a sense of anticipation building. The relationships he formed were pivotal, and he knew that the choices made by those around him would shape his journey in profound ways. Among the individuals vying for his attention were Grace, Dabi, Nam, Elizabeta, Ella, Bozak, Nock, Emmanuel, Twitch, Pishan, Lana Meyer, Himikyo Toga, Thiu Ajui, Katsuki Bakugo, and Rumi, Miriko, Usajiyama. Each had their unique qualities and strengths, and Izuku pondered who might capture his heart. As he navigated through the complexities of friendship and potential romance, he realized that each interaction held the power to influence not just his feelings, but also the challenges he would face ahead. The choices made in these relationships would undoubtedly lead to unexpected twists in his story, and he was ready to embrace whatever came next.